What's up, guys? Out here at the park doing a workout. So first part of the workout, which you can find all this stuff on my online training program, so if you're interested in this type of training, check out the link below. You can get started on your off season and get prepped for next year real well. So first part of the workout, I did 3 sets of 4, 60 meters, slight uphill with a 15-meter acceleration limit. On those, I was wearing the Exogen, so I got 300 grams on my thigh, 200 grams on the outside of my calf. So that way I'm loading the swing phase a little bit and getting some extra work in there. I did a 15-meter acceleration limit, so I'm accelerating through 15 and then just trying to maintain the rest of the way. Walk back for recovery, which comes out to about 2 minutes, give or take a little bit, and then longer rest in between. I am coming off of a cold, so I took some extra rest between reps. My calf is pretty tight from some calf raises I did the other day, and my knee was kind of funky, and I notice usually when I get sick, aches and pains kind of flare up. So I had to work around that, but still got the work in. So I did 12 total. It was pretty tough by the end of it, but I did it. Took a little bit of a rest. Now I'm doing some med ball throws, and then we'll finish with some drills. Now when we're doing these med ball throws, ultimately you want to get to a point where you are putting out max power, max force into the ball. But you also want to do it with some kind of good control. You don't want to just be flailing around like a total maniac, because you need to have a technically sound throw if you're going to throw it far. So I'm going to throw from this cone. I'm going to try to beat the cone over there. I know I can, but we'll start there and build up. So let's get after it. This is a 4-pound ball. I can go to a heavier one at some point, but for now, we'll just keep it here. So, some thoughts on general prep training, off-season training, all that as a sprinter. I think it's pretty important that you consider, where are you trying to get to? Well, eventually we want to be running, speed endurance or special endurance reps all out, not very many reps, long rest when we're trying to peak, right? So that's 120s, 150s, something like that. We want to be blasting those as fast as we can way down the road. It's late July right now, and I'll probably compete into early July next year. So if that's where we need to end, then we need to go back from that point and think about what can we do now, what can we do earlier in the year, even though it's going to be a different calendar year, but earlier in the training year to set ourselves up for success there. A lot of people will start with a lot of long running. Other people will start with very short running, like a short to long program. I'm doing something kind of in the middle with these repeat 60s because I want to maintain the ability to cover at least 60 meters and feel very comfortable doing that. So that way I don't have a huge transition I have to make if I go and start with just running like 10-meter sprints. I honestly don't think that doing a bunch of 10-meter sprints is going to do anything for me. So, and probably not for a lot of you either, because you've done a lot of acceleration work. So I'm using these 60s as a way to build up some sprint capacity over a distance that is relevant to the indoor season, running 60s, but do it in a way to where I'm progressing the intensity over time. So for example, the acceleration limits. We got a 15-meter acceleration limit. What's that going to do? That's going to cut off the peak velocity that you hit. So if I do the same workout, say I do this, 3 sets of 4, so 12 60s. Say I do that for months and I didn't change anything. Well, you'd obviously stop adapting at a certain point. But you can make changes to the workout itself without changing the entire workout. For example, changing the acceleration distance. If I accelerate to 30 as opposed to 15, I'm going to be hitting a higher velocity, and that will intensify the workout. Another thing I can do is go from this slight incline to flat ground. I can increase the rest periods in between reps. I can go to the track and be in spikes. All of those are different ways where you can manipulate what you're doing. Or, for example, I'm wearing wearable resistance right now. I can do it with the wearable resistance. I can take it off at a certain point. I can change the loading. There's ways that you can manipulate your training that don't simply come down to just changing the sets and reps. The sets and reps are important, but what goes into those sets and reps is just as important. So as you're setting up your training, if you're not going to hop on my program or someone else's, think about where am I trying to get to, and then back off to now, how can I do something that is still relevant to sprinting, but do it in a way to where the intensities are lower so that I can intensify over time and that the volumes are high enough at the beginning so you can drop the volume as you intensify and still end up with some, reasonable amount of volume so you don't just completely peak too early or something like that, you know? Like, what is this? This is 12 times 60, so that's 720 meters. Eventually I'll be doing like 1 or 2 times 120 in practice. So I'll be able to go, say I didn't increase volume at all, which I might increase volume at some point, but say I didn't do it at all. I still have a good amount of volume that I'm building up right now at decent speeds, to where as I intensify and get faster, I have some room to take volume off the table to exchange for the intensification that happens. And I think it's really important that you consider that in your training and don't just only think of, I'm going to go from short to long, slower to faster. Yeah, you're going to do that, but there's some nuances within that that I think you should take into consideration. Then the other thing is, you know, you can always add drills, med ball throws, you know, all kinds of different things to add to the volume you're doing right now, so you're not just running a whole bunch, but still build up a good work capacity, and then you just maintain that work capacity as you continue to intensify your training over time. Waited way too long for this throw, so let's get it in. Mic down. Go. That was way better. Felt it in my upper hamstring. Not in a bad way, but you know, you want to use, especially when you're doing that backwards throw, you want to use your posterior chain to launch it out, you know. Now, a lot of people have different justification for why they do med ball throws. Some people say that they're for power output. Other people say it's for like building some body control so that you can use your strength effectively. I don't know, there's all kinds of different ways I guess you could justify it. And that's another thing I want to make a video on at some point, is like, people come up with all kinds of justifications on why they do certain things in training, but it doesn't mean that that justification is actually reality, you know. I could say, oh, I'm doing this because of this, that, and the other, but we really don't have any proof. Anyways, that's a topic for a different video. As far as med ball throws go, I think in general, you know, it's a good general power output type of exercise, so it's something that's probably good to have in the program. Depending on what you do, you know, you could do rotational throws, you could do linear throws, forward, backward, vertical. But it's just another way to get some explosiveness into your training in a simple way. Grab a ball, you could put this in your, you know, in your car, bring it to the track, bring it to the park. It's easy to carry around, and gives you an opportunity to do some power output type work. You can change the weight of the ball. So maybe you start with a heavier ball, go to lighter, or you start with medium, go heavy, and then go to light when you're trying to peak. You know, all kinds of different things you can do. But you just, I would suggest you get a little creative with it and incorporate them if you think that transferring power from your legs through your whole body into an implement is something that you think you could benefit from. Then try it out. All right, do another one. Once again, much farther. I think we'll measure this one out. At a certain point, I do want to get to doing forward throws, but since my calf feels like it's going to explode, I think I'm going to save those for another day. Now, if you need a good measuring wheel, I'll put this in the links below. The Milwaukee measuring wheel is pretty good. It's digital read. You can do feet or meters. Has a little kickstand so you can leave it upright if you're, you know, measuring different distances. You don't want it to fall over. So that was, we'll call it 74.5 feet. I don't think that's too bad with a 4-pound. All right, so now I'm gonna do some drills. One thing I've been thinking about with drills lately is using drills to work on opening up a little bit more. And what I mean by that is, if you look at my technique from most of this year, I had a very kind of like stabby technique with my leg. So I feel like I wasn't loading my hamstrings enough, getting that sort of where the knee opens up a little bit and then the leg comes down and back to the ground. I wasn't really getting that. So I want to use drills as a way to lengthen out the hamstrings in a dynamic way, build up a little bit of specific strength in that area. And so I'm using the Exogen weights, I'll use the activator belt, basically using different implements, different forms of resistance, and different ranges of motion that are outside of the sprinting range of motion, like go to a little bit more extreme of a range of motion, to try and prepare those tissues for being able to open up a little bit more at speed. So combining, doing RDLs in the gym, different hamstring exercises in the gym with drills when you're doing your sprint workouts, I think is a good way to achieve that, because simply stretching isn't going to do it. Yeah, stretching can help, leg swings can help, but I think it helps even more to be doing a dynamic exercise that is somewhat related to sprinting. So that way you're kind of covering, you got your static flexibility, you got your dynamic flexibility, you got your range of motion under load with the RDLs, and kind of hitting it from all angles to try and improve the hamstring's ability to open up in sprinting, so you're not restricted. It's not about hitting some massive range of motion that is like unreasonably large for sprinting, but giving yourself access to a big enough range of motion so you're not held back by a limited range of motion when you sprint. All right, so I have to finish the workouts off during this phase, doing bodyweight exercises. This one I got from Dan Bach, Jump Science. The idea is you want to get as wide as you can comfortably get, then push it a little bit and hang out there, especially on a slippery surface, to build up those adductors. This is pretty hard. And just hold it. Bring it back. Probably don't need to do too many reps of this because it's pretty hard. I'm going to slide out nice and wide. Then we're going to hang out, getting nice tension through the adductors, through those tendons. Like I said, during the GPP phase, we want to finish the workouts with some exercises that are going to target different areas of the body. I want to specifically target areas that are taxed by sprinting. So for example, hamstrings, hip flexors, lower abs, calves, adductors. Those are all areas that sprinting hits pretty hard. When you're into your season and you're doing your very specific training, you're getting ready for your meets, you're not going to have necessarily that much time and effort to dedicate to those areas of the body or those, sort of local exercises, but they can provide a lot of benefit. So my view is to incorporate them early, hit them hard early in the year, and then you can kind of, once you've built up those qualities, maintain them with a lot less work, and eventually drop them out of the program when you're trying to peak, or getting close to trying to peak when you need time and energy to be spent on other things. But at least if you've done them earlier in the year, you've built up an ability to where you can maintain those without getting sore. You can maybe turn them into, like maybe earlier in the year, they're a training exercise, but then they become a warm-up exercise later in the year, something like that. But I do think there's benefit to be had from, lay on the ground and do explosive leg raises. You can do one at a time, 2 legs at a time, it's up to you. You could bring your leg up, flex and extend at the knee as fast as you can. You can go in a plank position, do single leg raises. You can do, work your obliques, all kinds of different exercises. But I do think it's wise to incorporate them early. So in the GPP phase of the program, I'm incorporating those from the start and trying to build up a good volume of work in these exercises that are general in nature, but they're specific in that they're targeting areas of the body that sprinting tends to hit pretty hard. And if we can strengthen those when the sprinting work is a little less intense and a little less specific, it's not going to disrupt our sprint training as much. We can build up those areas so that we don't get injured there later, they're stronger, less pain, whatever, get some benefits out of it, but do it earlier in the year. Okay. Like I said before, if you want to get good training, get into a GPP program, get into an off-season program that is going to help you, that's built for sprinters, then check out the link below, join it, try it if you want. And if not, just keep following the videos. use the workouts that I put in the videos, and you should be halfway there anyways. But that's all I got for you guys today. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. Leave a comment below with any questions. I'll catch you guys soon. This is Cody Bidlow of SprintingWorkouts.com and ATHLETE.X signing off.